And now, here's your host of Shaping Success, Wes Tankersley.
What is up, everyone? Welcome to Morning Coffee with myself and Robert Watson. If you guys haven't followed us, subscribed, checked it out, hit that little bell, whatever you want to do to make sure that you catch us every single Monday and Wednesday. We have a little bit of talk. Wednesday, we go through his book, R is Victorious. That is out. You can go check it out and some topics and things like that. Robert and I ran into each other here on TikTok. Oh, I don't know, probably 3-4 years ago, and just, kind of have the same type of mentality about a lot of things in life, trying to move forward, trying to be stronger, trying to be better every single day. And just some great conversations. We decided to take it to the old podcast, which has been good. Mondays, we talk just topics. Robert and I are going to talk a little bit about, we don't get really political, but this is kind of one of those things that leads into a lot of things. We're going to talk about the debate a little bit, and then we'll also talk about, if we get time, we'll talk about one of the videos that we have, one of the shorts that we talked about last week. I didn't talk to Robert about this, but I had said something about Idaho wages and living here in Idaho and how it's really tough because if you were born here, you can't afford a house anymore unless you really make a lot of money. So it's kind of weird, and people chimed in on it. Lots of comments, 6.9K views on that video. But let's talk a little bit about, well, before we do that, I got to have my magic mind. You guys, we talked about this magic mind a little bit. I got to get Robert. I'm going to have them send you over a sample pack of this. I'm going to give them a call. They actually have a sleep one coming out right now, which is good because that's what I need. The wake up actually is helpful too. It's an energy shot that's got a lot of good things in it, and it has like natural caffeine in it instead of regular, and they say to take it with your coffee. And what I've noticed with it is like I'm a little bit sharper every time I take it throughout the day. It lasts longer than my coffee and then Red Bull, and I've got those two kids, they keep me going. So check out Magic Mind. For now, you have a limited offer. You can use it at checkout. Go to magicmind.com/WestT20 and use that code WestT20 at checkout and get 20% off of your one-time purchase, or you can get 48% off your first subscription. So check it out. So Robert, let's talk a little bit about this. What are your thoughts on the debate? I mean, I think it was the hard part for me is like, I feel like it's pretty wide open about what's going on. Like we have a tough choice, right? But it's not really that tough, except for the fact that people don't like people who say naughty things.
Yeah. Well, my perspective's slightly different because I spent the 80s from 1980 on till 89 in West Germany and Italy, part of the army, as an intelligence guy, studying, of course, our opposition at the time, which was the Soviet Union. And so when I watched what was taking place, my perspective or point of reference was very different than others. My point of reference was, why do you have two incredibly old men representing the parties, in my mind, trying to keep control of power in the United States? Why is there not new blood? Well, in the Soviet Union's case, the old people didn't trust the young people to stay the course because they knew that the system was failing. And they were like, no, we have to control it. We have to keep control of it. If the word gets out that we really are a mess, then, it's just going to collapse. Well, I mean, obviously they were right. Gorbachev came in a much younger leader, and what happened? The system crumbled. And so the question then became, as I was staring at that, and again, listen, I'm really apolitical, but it was a very, very sad commentary on who we ask to lead us. And in this case, who we give the nuclear codes to. And to be honest, as a former military, I'm not sure that the Joint Chiefs of Staff can take an order from a commander-in-chief who looks to be not in his mind, who looks to not be able to make a decision.
Let's tell people a little bit about kind of what you did and why. We've kind of talked about it a little bit, but you're basically an analyst, right? So tell people kind of like what your job was to do in that time.
Well, keeping it in really generic terms, I worked for the Deputy Chief of Intelligence, United States Army Europe, and my job was, I had specific AOs, Poland, Yugoslavia, or whatever, but in the big picture, mine was to look at the capabilities of the battlefield commander as he relates to certain areas of operation. And in time of war, I ran the targets group. In other words, we were the ones that targeted whatever we were going to target during the conflict. And so I had to know an area of operations from the very top of things, like, exactly how the transportation system works, to what happens if you take out this bridge. I had to know everything in a country, social, economic, political, all the way up and down. And so we were constantly studying our opposition at the time and basically looking at them and saying, okay, what are they going to do? Well, in our case, we knew the Soviets weren't going anywhere. They weren't going to attack. They were incapable of it. We knew the system had been failing since the early 70s. And the KGB knew it, and they were trying to figure out how to ease this transition, right? So think about it this way. Countries are ran, no matter what your system is, by a group of elites. These are the people that are actually running the country, and you can call it democracy, you can call it authoritarian. You're just talking about a bigger or smaller group of elites. That's it. Yeah. And so this group of elites is running this country as well as running their country, and the elites were scared to death that they couldn't make a transition from where they were to where they wanted to be because they would lose power. One of the things that elites are trying to do is always keep power, right? Mm-hmm. They want to keep power. They want to keep money. Well, the reality was they knew they were in deep trouble and the system was going to crater and oops, they were going to lose power. Well, if you think about it, you have two really, really old guys representing supposedly two opposing political views. But I would say to you, not really.
Yeah.
And I know people keep thinking like, but you don't understand, politics are splintered. No. The elites are still in power. Doesn't make any difference. You're just given the illusion of choice.
Yeah.
But if you think about it, what really changes?
I think it's great, that people understand that that's where you're coming from, because I think a lot of times right now we have all these people who sit there and tell you all these things, but they really don't know. And having that job that you had before where you had to actually like kind of do the homework and analyze and figure out what was best for the certain situation is just like what we're talking about with the country. When you said that you were apolitical, it's kind of one of those deals. We have to find the right mix. And a lot of us are so mad at Trump or so mad at Biden that like we can't make an actual decision that is going to help us because we're just so like we're one way or the other. We can't lean. We can't decide. We can't go, hey, this is better for us than that. We're so mad at this guy, we're not going to vote for him. We're going to vote for that guy because we're mad at this guy, but it's not the best thing for the country. And I think that a lot of people get lost in the fact that they need to look at both sides of it. And whether you like Biden or not, if you saw what I saw, it was not good. Like, I mean, if I was going to have to sit there and look at these two different choices that we have and listen to that guy talk, we obviously know he's not the one pushing the button, right? Like maybe he may be the one who pushed the button, but someone else told him to, because I think he might not be able to find the button. It's just scary.
Yeah, and that's one of the things you're looking at is you're looking at them in a sense of credibility and legitimacy. In other words, is the Democrat or Republican Party a legitimate party to run the country? Do they have credibility? And what you saw was a lack of credibility. In other words, you didn't look like you could run the country. And so it isn't about politics because, again, I can take the person who's most left-leaning and the person most right-leaning and put them in a room together. And as we talk, they're going to agree on about 70 or 80%.
Right.
Really, truthfully, because, listen, we all want the same things. We want to be able to raise our kids, have a roof over our head, eat, travel on occasion. We're really, really simple people. It doesn't matter where I'm at and what country I'm at. My opposition, generally speaking, there are some differences when you get into ideology and religion, but most of the time, people want kind of the same things. You talk to a taxi driver in Bangladesh, or you talk to a taxi driver in London, taxi driver is going to sound the same.
Right.
Shockingly. And so we just have to realize that we've gotten to a point where what we should do is we should look through the debate and all the things that were supposedly wrong and ask the big, big questions of, geez, what are they trying to hide?
Yeah.
I mean, seriously, this is, yeah.
And Nikki said it's sad how his family should be ashamed for following or for allowing this. Like you look at it like, again, like I said, being on either side, whatever it is, like looking at it, he is not mentally fit to do this. And so then you have to look past the fact, just like you said, like, is he really actually running the country? And he's not, because he may be able to have the power to sign the executive orders, but like all those people behind him are the ones who are actually doing the work. So it's kind of tough if people think that what they're really actually voting for is a figurehead for someone to be like the speaker for the House and for Congress, right? Like for the Senate.
Right.
That's what they're doing. This guy is the person who's going to talk for everyone. And they may be able to write those executive orders, but really what's going on is there are a lot of people watching over our country that just aren't prepared or are in this same thought process. You look at like some of the things that like Mitch McConnell freezing on camera, like he just gets lost. Nancy Pelosi, same thing. It's like there's just so much going on with this. We're and it's going to take a lot, right, to allow like term limits, period, for anything, or age limits, because then that will be something that will be a problem, right? Like there has to be some way to filter this out where they have like a cognitive test where are they actually fit to do what they're doing?
Right. But the bigger question really should be asked, why? Why do you have a government that looks like this?
Yeah.
Why do you have a bunch of really, really old people? Because the population, we're supposed to have a government that's representative of the people. Mm-hmm. Well, think about it. What's the median age in America? They don't represent the median age in America. They represent a very, very small group. And here's what's interesting. They represent, whether we like it or not, a small group of really rich people.
Right.
Okay. And so that's not really representative of the people. So what is really going on? And that's the question we have to ask. And also ask ourselves the question is, if they're really clinging to power, if they're so desperately clinging to power, why? What are they afraid of losing?
Yep.
I mean this is some, this.
I think we've seen, right? Like, I mean, there's a lot of things that have coming out that, you know, that are tied to everything. It doesn't matter. Like these guys have this insider trading going on. They have these, I don't know. I feel like every movie I've ever watched, like I go back to like, Evan Almighty, which is a comedy, right? But like he's talking about like John Goodman is in charge of the power or whatever, which is causing the dams to flood or whatever. Like there's all these things going on where like he's in the pocket of someone. Someone's like, you know what? I'm going to pay you millions of dollars if you just push my agenda. And that's where it's at. It's like, it has nothing to do with what's good for us. It has to do with what's good for lining their pockets.
Yeah. Well, it was so interesting. I know this is such a far departure, but there's this new Star Wars series out called Acolyte, right? Mm-hmm. And so you would think this doesn't make any difference, but the critics have basically said it's a great show. And if you look at the Google reviews and stuff, they're like 14% positive, 18% positive.
Right.
And you're asking yourself the question of this departure between the quote unquote critics or tastemakers and the people that are actually consuming. And again, I'm not picking on the show. I'm just saying when you see these vast departures, right, and they're right in front of your face, you're like, well, hold on a second. The critics love this, but the people hate it. So are the critics representative of us? Are they the tastemakers of us? Just kind of like our leaders. This is back to the same idea. Who's leading who?
Right.
And why? And when we were looking and analyzing countries, we were always looking at them from a stability standpoint and saying, hey, oops, that leadership is not representative of those people. Those people are eventually going to get ticked off, and that's not going to go well.
Yeah.
And so that's one of the issues here in the United States. And this actually segues nicely into your comment about the changing real estate prices in your state, right?
Right.
Because it's the politics of certain states that are driving people to your state.
Yeah.
People are actually fleeing politics.
And if you're just joining us on TikTok, you know, this is Robert Watson and myself. We do this a couple days a week, Monday, Wednesday at, let's see, 7:00 Eastern. I'll give you Eastern time is when we do this. But we're talking about right now kind of the campaign a little bit and a comment that was made on one of the posts that we had. And we talked about, we're going to transition into that right now because it's a pretty popular post. I don't know if I'll try and look at that without getting any feedback from because I don't want to watch the whole video, but I want to go through some of the comments because people are talking about how this is happening all over the world. I don't think it's happening all over the world or all over our country. I think it's happening in a few states where where people are fleeing, like people are fleeing California for Idaho. And my point with the whole situation, where I was saying, like, people who were born here cannot afford a house, and they're like, oh, this is happening everywhere. It's not, though. Like, it's happening where people are fleeing certain states. COVID did this a lot. And in Idaho, we're feeling the heat big time. And some of the answers, it's like they don't really look into the context. So I implore you to go watch the episode and listen to the context of the conversation. We're going to talk about it again here, where this is what's going on, right? Like, because of COVID, there were so many mandates and things like that people in California did not like stay at home, your kids can't go to school. There was huge mandates. In Idaho, there was not, because we're, red versus blue or whatever. And people are coming here, they're buying homes, but what they're doing is they're buying a first home and they're living in it. So they're buying a starter home, which is what someone like me, 10, 15 years ago started out in. So 10 years ago when I bought a house, it was a 1,600 square foot home and it was $117,000. I sold that house, I don't know, it's been probably 4 or 5 years ago, but it has been so crazy that house is now a $400,000 house. And this is how many years later? Like I said, it's a $400,000 house. Now, wages historically, I was a teacher before I do what I do now. And luckily I got into sales in a very high volume. Thank you for the gift, Stephanie. A very high volume process. And so, like, I can afford what I live in now, but the people who were teaching is $38,000 a year. It hasn't changed much. I think they got like a $3,000 or $4,000 raise for starting salary for teaching, but it's crazy. You cannot afford a $400,000 house payment on a $38,000 a year salary. So these people are coming from San Francisco, Los Angeles, Seattle, Portland, these big giant cities, keeping their wage because they're working from home, making well over $200,000 a year. They can afford that $400,000 house, or they can buy that $400,000 house, keep it as a rental, go build their $1 million house, and keep the rental. So now no one can afford a house. Anyone that has lived here their entire life, unless they go work somewhere else, cannot afford to live here. Now, I'm not saying that this is only happening in the Treasure Valley, because this is happening in some other states too. Like, Robert lives in Texas. Like, I can imagine that Austin's kind of blown up and gotten really big and cost a lot more. I know that there's places in Florida. There's all these places. I'm not saying this isn't happening everywhere, but like, if you look at what that's doing to the demographic, it's basically driving these people who were born here to go live in an apartment. So it's crazy.
Yeah, and that's some of the things that we look at it, but again, it's them basically saying, and they're fleeing the politics of the area that they were in because they don't want to be in that political environment anymore. And I get that. That's the one cool thing about our country is we have 50 states, we have 50 different ways kind of running things, and people can flee one state to go to another for whatever reason. I think it's real obvious, though, that some of this stuff is eventually we had a big migration in the 70s, huge migration from the north, from the northeast to the south. Well, that's playing out now where you have pension plans and stuff that are basically broke, right? Because your tax base left. We've got some real issues that we're avoiding and not paying attention to. And for some reason or another, this is kind of goes back to this, why we have two really, really old guys running for president.
Right.
Where is the new blood? Where are the new ideas, right? What is going to take us to the next level? Who's representative of us? Now again, I'm older than most, but who's representing the mainstream America? Well, it doesn't seem like neither one of those are.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, it's a tough scenario that we're just gonna have to see how it unfolds. And I don't know. Like, there's a lot of things that may happen here, and we'll see. I don't know.
Thank you, Stephanie.
It is what it is. I don't know. Robert for president. Oh, but the thing is, though, is like, you think about that. Like, that's the type of person you want. Some like Robert the Running Street kind of qualifies you. I mean, that doesn't
Yeah,
qualify,
exactly.
but you know what I mean. Like, do you think that these people are doing everything they can to stay mentally sharp? That's the other thing too. It's like, I don't know.
We're just in a crisis, somewhat of a crisis of credibility in America. It
Yeah,
really is that we have this huge mismatch, right?
yeah,
That the idea, and here's the big lie: at the state level, we live in a democracy, but at the
mhm,
federal level, we live in a republic. Please let's not confuse that.
yeah,
51% do not decide what you do in America at the national level. We are a republic. That's why you have an electoral college. Again, this is what we have always struggled with. Democracy's biggest problem is this: 51% can make 49% do something. That's the
yep,
problem with democracy, right? The idea behind our current democracy is it really doesn't seem like the 51% is running things either.
mhm,
And as I said to you before, in most countries, almost all countries, depending, it doesn't matter how the leadership is struck, elites run the country. And so I'm suggesting to you now that the elites in this country no longer resemble or represent the core part of America.
right,
And that's what I think you're seeing at the presidential election level. You're seeing these elites, and what I'm asking is where's the 40-year-old?
yeah.
Where's the John F. Kennedy of this generation?
The funny thing is though, like, if you think about it, I'm 43, right? Like, and I had a friend on TikTok talk to me about, like, hey, dude, you should go, like, he was pushing this, like, go run for Congress, go run for Senate, go run for something, go be a representative, go be something. And like, I understand why he's saying that, but I don't want to be in the middle of that smoke. I don't want to be in the middle of that. And plus, I've never had aspirations to do that, but
Right.
I don't think that I want to do that. Like, that's not what I want to do. So, but I understand that. Like, I get that. Why? And I think that it really runs down to, like, we need to put some term limits on this stuff. No matter who it is, like, they need to be, there cannot be these lifetime politicians running our country because the new blood never comes in. And I think that's the biggest problem.
Right.
What's
And
happening,
the thing we're always struggling with is nobody in their right mind really seriously should want that job.
Yeah.
It's something they do because they feel obligated, like a steward. And I've tried to say to people that we need to change our entire vision of leadership to stewardship. Listen, I'm going to come in and I'm going to do this for 4 years or 6 years or whatever, and I'm going to protect it for my grandkids. That's what I'm
Right.
doing this for. I'm doing this for y'all because, come on, man, you get paid $400,000 a year and it costs you $1 billion to run for the office. Are you
Right.
nuts? That makes no sense. That doesn't make any sense because we're not talking about ideas. We're talking about money. And we need to be talking about ideas because that's what's going to change the country. That's what's going to make all the difference in the world. Instead, we talk about ideas. For example, and I know I hate to bring this up, but listen, abortion, Roe v. Wade, 72. Congress had the ability to enshrine Roe v. Wade for how many years? 40? 50
50,
years? They
according
had,
to Biden.
right, right. So my point is, but what did you keep it available for? So that you could fight about it.
Yeah. Well,
You
you
kept
think
it. You
about
could
that.
have enshrined it.
One of the things that really pissed me off about that comment was, like, he said, like, right off when he said it was, and I don't care where you stand on abortion, it's been that way for 50 years. So you're telling me everything that was happened 50 years ago is still relevant today? Like, I mean, is that what you're telling me? And that's where that kind of rolls down to. It's like, it's been that way for 50 years. So just because it's been that way for 50 years doesn't mean that it's still relevant, that it doesn't need to change, that they don't need to rewrite it or make it different.
Right. Or why didn't, if you believed in what you did, why didn't you make it an amendment to the Constitution?
Yeah.
It's had popular support forever. Why are we still fighting about something? You know why we're fighting about it? Because you can raise money.
Yeah, and then
Right?
the other thing too is, like you said, it's like we're in our states. We want our states to be run the way that they are, and I agree. On some point that like we need to. It shouldn't be just because if we make it a federal law, like you were talking about, the electoral college, 51% of this country is ran by those people. Well, if you think about the decisions that are made in an election or anything that is federally voted on, California and Florida make the decision for the rest of the country. So because they think that that's okay, because they're the largest populaces in the country, that they should make the decision for what Idaho does, for what Texas does, for what, like, just because you have a large population means that the whole country should do what you think is right. And I don't think that's correct. And
well, in the original 13 colonies, that was the problem, right? The original states that were into the Articles of Confederation were the little ones, Maryland and Delaware, were scared to death that Pennsylvania and Connecticut were going to tell them what to do.
Right.
And they said, no. The only way we're going to do this is we got to have equal representation. There was a reason why in the original Constitution that senators were voted on by the state legislatures because they were supposed to represent the states. Mm-hmm. So there was three parties to the Constitution: individuals, us, all members, the states, and the federal government. The states have been removed from this by losing their representation in the Senate in the early 1900s. So we have to understand. Now, I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm saying things evolve. But we also have to understand what happens when they evolve.
Right.
What we're getting, what we're not getting. And one of the things is everybody's like, well, we shouldn't run the Electoral College. And your point is, yeah, I don't want Florida and Texas and California making all the decisions.
Well, right? That's why, like, if you think about it, let's go back to California. Think about California. I talked to a couple the other day because, like, the majority of my job is selling to these people that are moving here from California, from Oregon, from Washington. They're coming here or wherever else, but they're fleeing. Like, they're political refugees is what they always tell me. Like, I don't want to change Idaho. We want what you have. Well, they say that, but they are changing it inadvertently. They're not doing it on purpose. I can't blame them for wanting to be here. However, you think about what's going on, and they're leaving, like California, okay? So someone came from Susanville, which is Northern California, which there's this thing that they want to make this greater Idaho. So part of Oregon wants to become Idaho, and part of California wants to become Idaho because of liking the politics. Well, the reason that they want to do that is because there's 3 cities that are highly populated in California that make the decision for the whole city, or for the whole state. So if you live in San Francisco, if you live in Los Angeles, if you live in San Diego, you're deciding for everyone else in that state that this is how we want things, and those people don't want it. So they want to get out of there. Like, it's understandable. Just like if you did want that, you'd want to move to those cities because that's what you want.
Yep. Yeah, we're trying to have representation that is representative of the people, right? And that's what you're trying to do in any kind of thing, any kind of version of democracy. And there are lots of versions of democracy, lots of them that actually, to be honest with you, run a little better than ours.
Yep. Yeah, it's a process, and I don't really necessarily feel, I don't know if we call this conversation political, but like it's a reality check for everyone. You need to kind of go out and you need to look and see what you're actually looking at. I don't care what, I'll have a conversation with anyone. Some of my best friends have way different views than I do, and that's okay with me. I just implore you to actually make a decision and look at it. That was one of the things that I was thinking about. As I'm watching the debate, I wasn't going to watch the whole thing, and then I ended up I got lost in the fact that there are 2 people up here. One person, like, all they're talking about is he's lying the whole time, while the other person is lying the whole time. While one person is somewhat coherent, but the other person is making no sense whatsoever. I mean, it's just insane. You got to look at that. Now we have these 2 choices. Which choice is the best choice? In all reality, you have to look deeper than just those 2 people.
Yep.
So, thank you everyone out for hanging out with us. We appreciate you being here. If you're on TikTok, make sure you subscribe. Follow both Robert and myself. Go over to the link in my bio, hit the YouTube channel. We will be having much more of these conversations. On Wednesday, we'll be going through Robert's book a little bit more. I haven't looked at the chapter again as usual, but I will look at it Wednesday morning and read the book because I want it fresh in my mind. That's the way that it works for me. Thank you to Magic Mind for supporting us and being a sponsor of the show. Go over to magicmind.com/West20, WEST20, and then use that code to get yourself 20% off or a 48% off your subscription. Robert, thanks for hanging out with us.
Appreciate you, Wes.
Yep. Until next time, challenge you to find the shape of your success and look a little deeper.